The Patriots visit the Jaguars this week. Both backfields are banged up. We'll tell you which running backs are value plays in that game. I'm Austin Lee. I'm joined as always by John Lee, Ryan Hester, Devin Knotts, and this is week 2. It's the Power Grid. We're going to be covering the main slate, and where we go first is Vegas. We like to see where the lines are and what that might tell us about some of these games this week. John Lee, I want to hear what you think Vegas is telling us for DFS this week.
Key game of the week, Big Ben at home. Right, Ryan?
Home road splits, right?
Yeah, we got to do that, right? So Kansas City, Pat Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, Kareem Hunt. A lot of offense on one side of the ball. We got a lot of offense on the other side of the ball. James Conner coming off of 38 DraftKings points last week. There is a whole lot of fantasy goodness in this game. We'll talk a lot about it tonight. Highest scoring teams this week, the Saints back at it again after their disappointing home loss to the Tampa Bay Bucks last week. This week they'll take on the Cleveland Browns, who get their first rainless game of the year. The Rams take on Arizona. And as we talked about, the Steelers. Those are the three highest implied team totals on the slate this week. At the low end, I think you're going to want to avoid teams like Arizona. So David Johnson takes a big step down this week after a disappointing week 1. And then Buffalo, probably no surprise, even though Josh Allen's at the helm. Maybe gives a little bit of life, a little bit of excitement for those Bills fans. But for us DFS guys, probably not so much.
It can't get much worse than last week, so it's got to be an improvement, right? I joke about the home road splits a little bit. It's one of our favorite topics behind the scenes on the Footballguys boards about whether that's a legit thing or not, especially for a player like Big Ben. Let's talk about some quarterbacks. Speaking of Big Ben, Ryan, I'm going to pitch this to you. He's playing this week, right? Ben Roethlisberger is going to play. He's just doing his usual sort of like, maybe I'll play. I don't know. I'm kind of hurt thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, I certainly hope so as a Steeler fan, but even taking that hat off and just being a fantasy football fan, I sure hope he plays because that game will not be a shootout if Joshua Dobbs is involved. But I think he will. He tends to dramatize his ailments. We'll see what happens with Friday practice. I think everybody realizes we record Thursday nights, so we obviously don't have that Friday practice info yet. But he could play even if he doesn't practice tomorrow. I think he will, at least limited, and then he'll play. And I don't think he'll be hindered by it at all in that game. And as John said, I think that game will be a shootout. Both defenses are suspect. Both offenses are very good. I don't see a way that it goes very far under the total, which is projected pretty high.
Yeah, definitely. They call him Mellow Yellow. It's Devin Knotts. He's got the yellow wall. If you're watching the video version here, Devin, we've got, some quarterbacks at the top of our lineup building tools that are interesting on Footballguys this week. Is Deshaun Watson in for a bounce back game at Tennessee?
Yeah, I think he is. I mean, we kind of knew that Bill Belichick, going against Watson the second time, might figure out Watson, but the Titans defense is not really a good one. So, it was a weird game this past week, but they allowed 230 yards passing to Ryan Tannehill and company with a pair of touchdowns. Adoree Jackson looked really bad. Malcolm Butler was burned for a 75-yard touchdown by Kenny Stills. So, Butler is a good player, but I think that, Watson and Hopkins should look to get on the same page this week. The other guy that I really like is going back to the well with Phillip Rivers. This Buffalo team looked inept against the Ravens last week. So Joe Flacco completed 25 of his 34 passes for 3 touchdowns, and really they could do whatever they wanted throughout most of the game. So it is a West Coast team going on the road to Buffalo, which isn't typically something that you want to look at, but Rivers had 424 yards and 3 touchdowns and looked like he was ready to go. And it seems like he's one of those quarterbacks that always gets out to a somewhat of a hot start. So he's a guy that I'm looking at pretty hard this week.
Yeah, John, how do you feel about the quarterback position this week? Aaron Rodgers is questionable this week with a knee injury. They're playing Minnesota, so maybe that's not where you would go regardless of how this shakes out. But is there another quarterback that you're looking at?
Definitely not going for a Green Bay quarterback this week, whether it's Aaron Rodgers or...
If he plays, though, should we consider him as a GPP play? No one's going to be on him.
You are 100% correct. If he plays, he's a very sneaky tournament play, but that's going to be a tough trigger to pull. I don't think it's a terrible play, but he has to practice in full on Friday. That would be my caveat. Guys I'm looking at this week, Jimmy Garoppolo against Detroit. If Sam Darnold in his rookie game, first game out, can throw for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns, they put up 48 points. He could have gone for more if it wasn't for 2 special teams touchdowns by the Jets. I like Garoppolo here in a bounce-back spot. He's only $6,000 on DraftKings. And then, of course, you can't look past Pat Mahomes, 6,100. He's $100 more against the Steelers. I don't think this defense is much. I've been ringing this bell for about 2 years straight now, and we saw exactly what they're capable of last week against what I perceive to be a much better Chargers defense in Los Angeles. I was about to say San Diego.
Ryan, I want to pitch it back to you to talk a little bit more about quarterbacks. A couple of cheaper guys we have near the top of our list on the site, Tyrod Taylor, Alex Smith. Either of those guys interesting to you this week, or do you have another quarterback in mind that could be interesting, like Drew Brees against Cleveland potentially after that big game last week?
Yeah, it's going to be hard going any higher than 6,000, and especially north of, I don't know, 6,500 or so. The 2 names you mentioned prior to Brees, Smith and Taylor, were the 2 that I had written down for cash games. Smith first, Taylor second. I know Jimmy Garoppolo's the exact same price as Smith, so that's a pretty interesting decision there that could be the difference between folks winning a lot and losing a lot this week. Smith, I think, is the guy with a safer floor. He's my number 1 cash game quarterback. And, a little foreshadowing to the end of the show, I might be mentioning Jimmy Garoppolo there in a tournament stack type of format where I like him a little bit better. So you can end up using a pretty similar lineup and just having those 2 guys. And then I'm not really going much higher in price because I'd prefer to get the volume heavy receivers and running backs in rather than quarterback.
Yeah, and a lot of those prices were DraftKings prices. If we don't say it, usually we're talking about DraftKings, but you got kind of similar values, I would say, over at FanDuel this week. Guys, anything else about quarterbacks before we move on to the running back section?
I'll throw it out there. Hey, this Detroit-San Francisco game is interesting to me. I think you've got a couple quarterbacks who are better than average, dare I say good, in Jimmy Garoppolo and Matthew Stafford. And then you have some running backs. I mean, let's talk about the running backs in San Francisco. Are we excited about Breida or Alfred Morris? No. And then tell me.
I like Breida.
Say again?
I like Breida.
All right, we'll talk about him in the next section then, because I'm not excited about him. And I'm certainly not excited about any of the running backs in Detroit. And so I think that, I've already mentioned Garoppolo. What about Stafford? 6,100. He looked terrible on Monday night.
No. Did you read the article that the reason that the Jets were dominating the defense is because they knew the hand signals of Jim Bob Cooter?
I did read this article.
Can you change your hand signals in 4 days? I mean, maybe, but are the receivers going to be confused? Like, that's a big red flag that Jim Bob Cooter is inept enough not to change his hand signals.
I'm gonna err on the side of caution here and say that I'm pretty sure it can be done in 4 days.
Maybe.
And let's not forget that the San Francisco secondary is not much. Last week, Kirk Cousins did whatever he wanted to do. He didn't have to do a lot because of that defense. But this week, Garoppolo is going to score at will against this defense. I think this game goes back and forth. I love Stafford's prospects here, and he's 6,100. I think we've got him less than 5% owned on Thursday night. I love him as a GPP play.
And John mentioned ownerships. We've got some free content over at Football Guys this week for you guys to try out if you don't have a Daily Fantasy Pro subscription. We've got our lineup building tools. We've also got our projected roster percentages that you can check out. That will give you an indication for those GPP plays whether you should try to find someone who's lower owned or higher owned in your tournament plays. Also, this week, we've got all of college football fantasy is free. So come check us out. Week 2 content, lots of free stuff over at footballguys.com. Let's talk about some running backs, guys. We've got a few injury situations here. Running back may be the most banged up position of the week. We've got Leonard Fournette dealing with a hamstring injury. We've got Devonta Freeman with a knee injury. The New England backfield is still a mess. Darren Sproles sat out on Thursday. And then Le'Veon Bell didn't show up again this week, but I think everybody sort of knows that at this point. Devin, I'm going to come back to you on running backs. Is there any sort of injury situation that opens up some value for you this week?
Not really. I mean,
not too excited about the guys that are kind of available behind these injury guys.
Tevin Coleman's interesting, but the Panthers are not really a game that I really want to target. TJ Yeldon, we've kind of seen this before. I mean, haven't we? Like, he's going up against New England, which New England's run defense wasn't good last week. I mean, they gave up 134 yards on 25 carries to Lamar Miller and Alfred Blue. So of the bunch, he's probably the most interesting. But none of these injuries really – I mean, it's going to drive ownership for sure because people love to start guys. I do think the most interesting one to me is the Rex Burkhead one because if he's out, they don't trust Sony Michel. The only 2 active, I believe, running backs that they'll have are James White and Kenyon Barner. So they could call up Ralph Webb, but he's not ready. I think James White's in a good spot this week. And the reason that I say that is look at Jacksonville, right? So they have an elite defensive line. Yep. And the Patriots may just say, you know what? Our running game is going to be the extension of the pass, meaning we're going to dump it down to James White, and throw to James White some more. Didn't we see this last year a couple times where he just had these monster games sort of out of nowhere? He's a guy that I really like. And, it's kind of risky because he could have a 0, but he's probably my favorite GPP running back if Burkhead is out.
Yeah, and without not that he was a big part of it, but you said that they're really depleted. Like Jeremy Hill isn't even,
right. Jeremy Hill's out, so
he's gone as well. So
he led the team in targets last week.
Yeah,
he led the team in targets last week.
Yeah,
I mean, more than Rob Gronkowski. He's got to be on your radar. He's an excellent play this week.
Yeah. Can I talk about David Johnson real quick?
Yeah, tell us about David Johnson.
John hates it, so just flash up your red right away. But David Johnson,
you're listening to the audio version and haven't seen the video version, we've got green Black-Eyed Joes means you agree with the take. Red Black-Eyed Joes means you don't. And I swear to the YouTube commenters who are concerned about red-green blindness, we are going to get to fixing those signs at some point. I apologize for that, but that's what we got going on. Tell me, David Johnson, Devin.
Yeah. So the Rams, right? Who has the best secondary besides the Jaguars in the league? It's probably the Rams with Aqib Talib and Marcus Peters.
Yep.
Their defensive linemen, probably 2 of the top in Ndamukong Suh and Aaron Donald. But their linebacking core is probably the worst group in football with Corey Littleton, who's a first-year player, and Mark Barron, who they keep trying to move him from safety to linebacker, and he's dealing with an Achilles injury. This is a team that gave up 4.7 yards per carry last year, and realistically, I think all of the offense could go through David Johnson. So they're not projected to score many points, but this could be a game where David Johnson has 6, 7, 8 catches because they're simply not going to have anyone else to throw to because Larry Fitzgerald's going to draw Talib. And then the other receivers are probably going to, Marcus Peters or LaMarcus Joyner, either one, at safety. I don't see how they move the ball without David Johnson.
What about
John?
Ricky Seals-Jones?
No, because he's gonna draw LaMarcus Joyner.
The other thing that's tough, though, is that there seems to be quite a bit of running back value this week. I mean, if you're not going to pay all the way at the top with Alvin Kamara, you've got the James Conner bias because he had such a huge game last week and Le'Veon Bell isn't back.
I'm not saying for cash. There's no way.
Okay, great.
But this could be a game where David Johnson has 10 catches.
Yeah.
Could happen.
Yeah. I'm not saying he's – yeah.
I don't hate Ricky Seals-Jones, but it's one of those scenarios where we've seen 9 for 91, 8 for 103 from Johnson. It could be one of those types of games just because they're not going to have any other way to move the ball.
I think you've successfully laid out why David Johnson's ownership might be low and why he might be a good play for that reason. I mean,
we can move on,
right?
Yeah, that's the whole argument is that no one's going to play them. They're 13-point dogs on the road. They're one of the lowest projected scoring teams. I'm not saying in cash, but David Johnson's too good to have this low of ownership.
So I can buy that too. But can we at least discuss, and I was looking for the tweet as you were talking. Of course, I can't find it. But the way that Steve Wilks used David Johnson last week in terms of where he lined up, whether it was on the periphery, out of the slot, or out of the backfield, in comparison to last year under his previous coach, it was really not attractive. Can we agree on that?
They were also down 21-0 in the second quarter.
But that's the whole point, right? If you're down 21 points, as they probably will be against this offense this week, why would you not line him up out of the slot where he's a good receiver in an advantageous situation?
We had 9 targets, right? So.
I have it here, John. I put it in trend spotting this week because I noticed it. But it was 2016. He lined up out of the backfield 36% of the snaps and 41% of pass routes. Week 1, it was 14% compared to 36. 9% of his routes compared to 41. So Mike McCoy is no Bruce Arians, I think, is the main takeaway there. And that was from Pat Thorman, so it wasn't me, but credit to him.
Yeah, I mean, we can move on. I just think we've spent too much time on David Johnson already. But
no, we haven't. The guy's probably one of the best talents in the league. We haven't spent too much time on him. It's a good point. Just a matter of whether you get it right or not.
I think getting David Johnson at his ownership against the worst run defense in the league last year is always a good play.
Fair. Let's talk about some cash game plays. We agree he's not a cash game play. I think we like him as a GPP because of his ownership. It seems like some of the popular plays this week are going to be Connor, Melvin Gordon against that terrible Buffalo team, and Christian McCaffrey is probably going to get some decent run just because Greg Olsen is out. Which of these guys do you like, Ryan, and who else do you have on your list?
Yeah, Connor and McCaffrey were at the top of mine. I mean, Connor's offense, the game he's in, and the workload he's going to get, would you not pay $8,000 for him on DraftKings? I mean, he's $6,700. Right. You could make an argument he could cost $1,000 more, and he still might be worth it. The other thing with McCaffrey that I wanted to call out is Atlanta has allowed the most receptions to running backs 3 straight seasons, and they just lost Keanu Neal, who's a safety, and Deion Jones, who's a linebacker, both of whom presumably would be covering pass-catching running backs. Both those guys are out for the year. So I think McCaffrey has a solid receiving floor, and as we saw, he played, I think, over 80% of the snaps last week. So his preseason usage is actually a thing that they want to do. So he and Connor are at the top of my list there for cash values.
I mean, it has to be Alvin Kamara, right?
Yeah.
I mean, just plug him in.
There too.
Plug him and Connor in, I think, and move on.
I think those are going to be the 2 most popular. Sure. It's just there's a lot of good options.
And not to segue to receiver prematurely, but
sure.
If you're talking about Brown, Kamara, I mean, you have to decide between one or even kind of put a third high price guy in there, and you have to decide between 2. That's kind of the key to figuring out this week, I think. It is harder this week to find values unless some of these injury situations allow us to do that.
But as in cash, right now, it's Kamara over Brown, right? It has to be.
I would think so.
Can I ask a question?
Hi. What?
I mean, not to bring up a certain person's name, but last week you could have had Ryan Fitzpatrick for around 5,000, and a certain somebody got lambasted on this very show about even considering him in cash. But could you consider, and I'm not suggesting this, I'm wondering this week, could you consider Josh Allen against the Chargers, who gave up 36 points, 38 points last week, so that you could get Kamara and Antonio Brown in your cash game lineups?
No, thank you.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
I'd rather play Josh Dobbs if Roethlisberger scratched.
Okay.
But you're agreeing to at least one Josh.
I'm just asking.
I would rather. I mean, if Marcus Mariota was out, I'd be all over Blaine Gabbert because I think he's the best quarterback on that team. But let's move on.
Love it.
Oh man! All right, let's move on to the next position here, guys. We're going to talk about receivers.
Hold on 1 second. I will say that if you want to take Brown and Kamara, what you do is you take Mitchell Trubisky at 5,200 and play the Sunday Monday slate.
Oh, okay, fair. Yeah, we usually stick on the main slate, but if you've got a bigger slate, I can see that. All right, let me tell you about a FanDuel deal we got going on. It's going to be for people who are not currently FanDuel customers. So maybe that eliminates a lot of you, but it's a pretty sweet deal. All you have to do is go to our website to find the deal on our Buy Now page, or you can go to fanduel.com/FBG. You got to make a new account, make a deposit, and you get a free All-Pro subscription. That's everything on our website. So great value if you're a new FanDuel customer. Check that out. Let's talk about some wide receivers, fellas. We've got a couple of injuries we're keeping an eye on, but nothing too big here. Alshon Jeffrey is still banged up, and then Deshaun Jackson is looking questionable this week. And then a couple of kind of smaller issues here. Marquise Goodwin and Travis Benjamin look like they might not go. Oh, and Corey Davis might have an issue with his hamstring. So, John, I'll pitch it to you first here about wide receivers. Any of these injury situations interesting to you, or do you have some other receivers on your radar?
Well, I mean, I don't think you can ignore Nelson Aguilar after what he did last week. He's the preeminent receiver there in Philadelphia. Going up against Tampa Bay defense, we're talking about what Ryan Fitzpatrick did last week against New Orleans, but let's not forget about what happened on the other side of the ball, and certainly Drew Brees is accountable for some of that. But Jeffrey not being there really helps Aguilar's fantasy prospects, and that's not only for DraftKings but also FanDuel as well. The remainder of them, if Marquise Goodwin doesn't play, I'm interested in Dante Pettis at what, $4,000? Is that what he is against Detroit?
Cheap. Yeah, I think that's a great call.
I think that you really can't go wrong with slotting him in there. I think he scored a touchdown last week. No issues with him whatsoever. And then we kind of buried the lead, but Antonio Brown this week against Kansas City. Last week there were two receivers for the Chargers that had double-digit targets against this team. I guess triple-digit targets is too much, but double-digit targets is almost guaranteed with Antonio Brown this week.
It could be 20 or more.
It really could. So from that end, he's my favorite receiver this week, especially for cash games.
Nice. Whenever you adjust to those wireless headphones, I feel like, John, you've got like earrings that you're just like.
Well, when you're 60 years old like I am, you have to keep them embedded. Otherwise, you slowly lose hearing throughout the show.
You look great for 60, John. Great for 60,
man. I appreciate it.
Ryan, you got some receivers you like this week?
Yeah, I guess I'll go more the GPP route because John covered the cash game ones pretty well. I'm just never going to take Tyreek Hill off my GPP list for as long as we do this show. He will be way too highly owned this week, but his salary went up significantly since last week. So some of the sharper cash game players or just sharper players in general might not want to deal with that. And also, how about?
I mean, on FanDuel, he's not high. He could be 90% owned, and in GPPs, that's not high enough.
Yeah,
he's 7,600 on FanDuel, which is criminally low.
Yeah. Well, I show 76 on DraftKings and 81 on.
Or I'm sorry, you're right. It's 76 on DraftKings, which I still think is too low.
Yeah, he was 67 or something last week. But anyways, then staying in that game, fewer people will be on Juju Smith-Schuster because of what John just said. And I was looking at deep ball stats for trend spotting. I'm going to try to do that throughout the year. Kansas City and Pittsburgh were number 1 and number 2, respectively, in deep balls against, like deep ball attempts against last week. The Chargers attempted 14 and the Browns attempted 12 against Pittsburgh. So that's number 1 and number 2. And those quarterbacks really like to throw deep. And so I think we're going to see a lot of that in this game. So plenty of big plays to be had. So don't forget about Team Juju.
Nice. Devin, who do you like at receiver this week? I need you to disagree more. You're agreeing a little bit too much.
I'm stunned that you guys haven't mentioned the clear cash game guy, which is Emmanuel Sanders. The connection that him and Case Keenum have showed in the preseason, showed in week 1. I mean, he's not priced high enough. He had 10 catches for 135 yards and a touchdown. It's still taking in some of last year or the year before pricing in when he had Trevor Siemian and Paxton Lynch and all these random quarterbacks that are below replacement level quarterbacks throwing to him. This guy's going to have an Adam Thielen type year. I mean, let's just prepare for it. Take advantage while his price is still too low and plug him in your cash game lineups. From a GPP standpoint, DeAndre Hopkins burned a lot of people. I think he's going to be under-owned because of that, and he's going against the Tennessee secondary, which we've talked about is not great. So he'll see some of Adoree Jackson potentially, which is very favorable. And I mean, Hopkins, they have to get right. I mean, they weren't great last week, and it could be a big Hopkins game. And then the last guy that I'm looking at, I really want to take one of these Minnesota receivers. I just don't know which one. And it tells me that in GPPs, just mix the two. Honestly, because it could be either one, and one of them probably will have a big game against this Packers secondary. And FanDuel special, Randall Cobb is 4,600, which is an absolute joke because Devontae Adams is dealing with a shoulder injury. So in cash games, on DraftKings, he's 4,600. I have my sheets mixed up, which is ridiculous.
And Xavier Rhodes, Devontae Adams will be dealing with as well.
Right. It's an absolute misprice. And
100% if that's the case. If that happens 100% across DraftKings, GPP, and cash games, you can look me up on Monday morning.
As long as Rodgers plays.
Subscribe to happen, I will have 100%.
You're saying if Devontae Adams is out and Aaron Rodgers plays?
And Aaron Rodgers plays and Xavier Rhodes is on the other side of the field, I will have 100% Randall Cobb.
Gotcha.
At 4,600.
Yeah, that's dirt cheap on DraftKings.
Yeah.
Way too cheap.
One guy I haven't heard mentioned, Michael Thomas, going up against Cleveland. Big game last week. Is this one of those situations where New Orleans was playing from behind and so he had an especially big game, or is Thomas worth considering this week? What do you think? Here, let's do the Black Eyed Joes. If you think he's is he a cash game play this week for you guys at all? Green if you say yes, red if you say no. Not really.
He's a cash game play. I just don't know if he'll make my roster.
Yeah.
That's the issue. Like, he's appropriately priced. He's probably going to be appropriately owned, about 20 to 25%. And so for that reason, you could come up with a reason to go with him or against him. And I wouldn't hate you either way for it. I think it's about right.
What about Jarvis Landry, 6,300?
I like that.
I talked about Jarvis Landry on the video edition of Tips and Picks this week.
15 targets,
I think he's an excellent play this week against a team that obviously had a lot of defensive lapses last week against Tampa Bay. What are they? 10-point underdogs, 15 targets, as you pointed out, Devin. And he's 6,300 this week.
Yeah, on DraftKings.
And unlike his Miami days, some of those targets are actually more than 10 yards down the field too. So you valuable targets.
He averaged 15.1 yards per catch.
Wow. That is way more than Miami.
He's not playing in the slot either. He's playing on the outside.
Correct.
And we've got him at and Josh Gordon's going to get the Marshawn Lattimore treatment this week. So it's he's going to be dealing with shoot, I can't remember. It starts with a K. It drives me crazy when I can't remember early in the season. But
you are 60.
The lesser coverage. When you're my age, these types of things go. And he's going to be owned at like 5%. So at 5%, I want a lot of him. And you definitely get some exposure to Jarvis Landry this week.
What are we doing in Tennessee with Corey Davis if he misses?
Well, with Delaney Walker also out.
Is it Jonnu?
It could be Jonnu. I think that's a good call.
We're not on tight ends yet, but are there any receivers that we like?
It would have been Taywan Taylor, but they started playing Tajay Sharp ahead of him in the middle of the preseason. I like Taywan Taylor as a player, but he's just not playing, so you just don't know.
It'll end up being Darius Jennings just to troll us all, but
I'd steer clear. I wouldn't mess with it.
Me too.
And with the style player that Corey Davis is, that hammy thing makes me a little nervous, even if he plays. I don't like it.
I think Jonnu Smith is a play for what it's worth.
Yes, if there is one, that's what I would go with.
Yep.
One thing real quick before we leave the section, it's worth noting Tampa lost Vernon Hargraves for the year and might be without Brent Grimes in this game. So 2 corners and Grimes is playing?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. This was an older note then. Jason Pierre-Paul, what about his status? I read that he's a little nicked up as well. But so I regardless of Grimes or not, I expect Philly to bounce back a little bit from the lackluster Thursday showing because Tampa's really bad even with their starters playing.
Vernon Hargraves.
New England?
Say again, John?
Is Philly the new England's in terms of picking fantasy players? They got
you mean you don't know who to
running
pick?
backs. Say again?
Yeah. You mean you don't know who to pick?
Yeah, I'm asking. It's tough, right?
I mean, with Nick Foles being as bad as he is, can we trust any of them?
Yeah, that's the issue.
I mean, if there's one guy I'm trusting, it's Jay Ajayi just because he had the knee injury and Doug Peterson came out after the game and said we're going to use him even more than what we did last week.
And Darren Sproles is banged up a little bit, so I think Ajayi's the play here, especially with them, playing against the Bucs.
I just don't put money in Nick Foles. I know he won a Super Bowl, but
he's the MVP.
I don't care.
So was Joe Flacco.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about tight ends, guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You told me to disagree more, so that's what I did.
Excellent. You did great there, Devin. Excellent. Let's look at these injuries. We mentioned this before. Delaney Walker is out for the year. Greg Olsen is out as well. I don't know if any of those create interesting situations for you guys. Who are you playing at tight end? Ryan.
George Kittle.
Oh, yeah.
He's for cash games. That's where I'm starting. I may move up or down depending on how the rest of the roster goes. But I found myself with cash clicking George Kittle and Alex Smith, and then kind of figuring out the rest this week. He had, I think, 5 catches, 90 yards, which is impressive enough. But if I had $1 for every time I read about what he could have had, I would be able to buy a DraftKings lineup myself. So you've probably all seen it, but he dropped what could have been an 80-yard touchdown. He got free for another play behind a safety, was overthrown, had another touchdown. I think that was close. I mean, the guy could have had almost 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. Played almost every snap, ran a route almost every time they threw. Super athletic. Marquise Goodwin might be out, so the target share is a little compressed. There's just and the Lions got killed in the middle of the field by Quincy Enunwa, and a bunch of tight ends from the Jets caught some balls, and I've never even heard their names. So it's just really all lining up for Kittle to be the play. He'll be super high owned, which is why he's cash game only probably, but that's where I'm starting at least.
Yep. Ryan says 200 yards and 3 touchdowns for Kittle. John, do you agree?
Yeah, I was just about to say this is the most intelligent thing I've ever heard Ryan say on this show.
200 yards and 3 touchdowns?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, every bit of logic and reason that he put forth there as I readjust the earphones is perfect. I really hope that you nailed it. I'm with Kittle 100%. If you want to drop down $200, I guess you can go with Jared Cook, who saw a slew of targets last week against obviously last week, but I think was unique because of the Rams and how they're going to funnel action to the inside for most of the season. But he's going to go against Denver. And who predicted – what's the guy's name? Disley?
Will Disley.
Disley. Who the heck knew Will Disley's name before last Sunday? Seriously, raise your hand.
Cecil Lammy.
Yeah, Cecil Lammy knew his name. So from that end, I think you can look at maybe Jared Cook as an alternative. But for the $200 more, I want the name brand, and I want the fact that Marquise Goodwin might be hurt or at least slowed down.
George Kittle has a name brand over Jared Cook?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
You guys are nuts.
No, we're not.
This is coming from the group that told me to start.
He's gone from 16 different teams over the course of his career, and George Kittle has been in the league for, what, 2 years?
This is coming from the two guys that pounded the table and told me to start Austin Seferian-Jenkins. I understand he was out. I'm going with the same guy that I went with last week, which is Jordan Reed, because he's still underpriced. He's still at 6,200, 600 more than Kittle. I get it. I get why you're looking at Kittle. But, I mean, to me, we've talked about how Alex Smith is going to have a big game. That starts with Jordan Reed. He's the number one receiver in that offense. And he's at home. He's the guy that he's simply too talented for the price that he's at.
And he's got Alex Smith throwing to him this year, which, is funneling more action his way.
And can we all agree that Travis Kelce is done?
You made a great point on last week's show about
but we're not writing him off this week.
I'm not going there yet.
At 6,800, until his price comes down significantly, you can't play him.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah, his price needs to adjust to his new quarterback.
Like David Njoku or Travis Kelce this week, and I don't know who to pick.
Like if they were the same price.
If they're the same price, I don't know which one will have a better game. I think Njoku could have. I mean, Njoku's more talented he's surely more talented than Kittle, but he's a very good play at 5,300 because they're going to be throwing a lot in Cleveland because they're going to be down and it's going to be a shootout type of game.
Let me see.
Kittle's a good athlete too. Kittle's a
never know. Seriously,
freak. Come on,
Devin. I never know when you're being serious and when you're just being contrary.
What am I not being serious?
Do you really think that George Kittle is not a great athlete with solid hands that is a perfect fit in the offense that Shanahan has put together? Do you really believe that, or are you just trying to
I don't think he's as. I mean, there's a reason he was a 4th round pick. This isn't.
Tom Brady was a 6th round pick, right?
But this is a guy who's in his 2nd year of the league, or 3rd year.
Second.
You just don't see 2nd-year tight ends do this. You don't.
And Jared Cook has been in the league for how long?
And Jared Cook's had big games here in Jared Cook is what George Kittle is probably going to be.
I don't know. I saw a stat this week. I don't know it exactly, but essentially Jared Cook has 700-yard games in his career, and I think the average yardage in his game after is about 12. So
yeah. And he had all of those with different teams.
Jared Cook, we talked about his brand. His brand is doing this and then doing nothing when people start catching up.
Who else are they going to throw to in this game?
No, it's a good matchup.
Amari Cooper has Chris Harris. That's not
a good matchup.
Jordy Nelson has Bradley Roby. That's not good. So if we take those two off the table like we did last week with Aqib Talib and Marcus Peters, who are they going to throw to? He had 12 targets last week. I'm not saying. I mean, if the cornerbacks weren't good, I wouldn't be going after Jared Cook. But because the corners are so good in Denver, just like they were last week on the Rams, I think Cook's the guy who's going to see a lot of passes this week. And I'm not being contrarian like sometimes I am. I really think he's going to see 10 to 15 targets like he did last week.
Just to clear things up, can you tell us when you're being contrarian so we know when to just let you go?
I mean, when I say Blaine Gabbert is better than Marcus Mariota, I only partially mean that.
Okay, there we go. We found the bar. We found where the line is. Okay, I feel better. All right, let's move on to some other stuff here. Before we go, I want to see red or green Black Eyed Joes. Ricky Seals-Jones is only 2,900 on DraftKings. Yes for GPPs or no? We've got John saying yes, Devin saying no, and Ryan making a face that I will be sure to capture for our thumbnail for the video.
Well, you always get me at my best anyway, so what else is new?
That's the goal, is to make Ryan look silly on the thumbnail.
Real quick,
So, I mean, why can't we like Ricky Seals-Jones at 2,900 on DraftKings?
Because Jared Cook's 700 more.
$700 though.
But I mean, punt at defense, just like I did last week with the Browns at 2,000.
So what? Jared Cook last week had 12 targets against what team?
The Rams.
And what team is Ricky Seals-Jones playing against this week?
Understood.
Okay.
The problem is when is Sam Bradford thrown to tight ends?
This week.
Okay. 10 years in the league, and he doesn't throw to tight ends, but all of a sudden
he should have had a touchdown last week. It was a low throw / drop.
Guys.
But the GPP pivot that I like more, since everybody's going to be on Kittle, Jack Doyle's only 200 more. And for the record, Devin, the Jordan Reed, George Kittle price difference on DraftKings is 1,200. So
I was looking at FanDuel.
No, I know. I just in case anybody heard that and said, "Oh, Devin's wrong again." No, but Jack Doyle is only 200 more than George Kittle, so he kind of is in the same price range. And he was loaded with targets last week, and
all day
again. So he's a guy who should probably be a little bit under the radar despite good production in week 1.
Serious question. I'm not being contrarian here. I'm not Devin here, but Jack Doyle and Eric Ebron. Eric Ebron last week, almost as many yards, not as many targets, but he got a touchdown. A lot of people I think are going to be on Doyle. Is Ebron the logical pivot from him if you're doing GPPs? Because I think Doyle's going to be heavily owned.
In GPPs. I don't think either have enough upside in GPPs. As weird as that sounds.
I think they probably do, right? Because last week, let me look at this quickly. Doyle had 13 points on DraftKings, and Ebron had 15.1.
Yeah, but I think O.J. Howard has more upside. I think Jared Cook has more upside. I think George Kittle has more upside. I think David Njoku has more upside. I think Ben Watson has more upside. Jonnu Smith has more upside if Corey Davis misses. There's a lot of guys. Ian Thomas, if Olsen's out, which is looking like he will be. I like Doyle in cash. I just don't ever go to the Colts tight ends in GPPs because do we see 2 touchdowns out of either of them?
No, I agree with you. So for me, it's probably a void for me, and maybe I set myself up here. But the reason I won't take O.J. Howard is the same reason I won't take Jack Doyle or Eric Ebron, because I'll be pissed off if I get one guy over the other. And they're all in play, but I just never know from week to week. So I'd just rather take a guy who I know if they throw to the tight end, it's going to be my guy.
Yeah. All right, guys, let's move on to defenses. Give me 1 or 2 defenses you're looking at this week from the main slate. Ryan, who is your favorite defense of the week?
New York Jets, 2,500 hosting the Dolphins. It's cheap enough, home favorite. They looked pretty active and exciting.
Because they had the hand signals.
So, maybe there's some familiarity in their own division against a lesser quarterback and lesser receiving core. So
I just want to hear you say Jim Bob Cooter again. Whenever I hear that, I have flashbacks to my childhood of watching Dukes of Hazzard.
You also live in Atlanta, so
I've been to Hazard County.
Yeah.
Ryan, you got any? So you like the Jets?
Yep.
Awesome, John. What defense you like this week?
Either the defenses from Los Angeles, the Rams or the Chargers. Rams against Arizona, Chargers against Buffalo. They're going to be chalk, but for cash games, that's the way I'll go. If I'm doing GPPs, I'm going cheap, and I'm going with the Jets, as Ryan suggested, or Minnesota against Green Bay, especially if Aaron Rodgers doesn't play. They'll likely become chalk if that happens.
Oh, yeah.
Kaiser.
Like 100% chalk.
Yep.
Yeah. California love. All right, Devin, who do you like at defense?
Jacksonville.
They have a good defense, I've heard.
Yeah. Going up against New England, I mean, whenever I can get the Jaguars for 2,800, I know it's New England, but I'm looking that way, especially in GPPs. The other defense that I'm really looking at, which is a little bit scary, but the Houston Texans against Tennessee. I'm not going to talk about Marcus Mariota again. I've reached my limit.
Don't. Yep.
And the Texans have a decent pass rush. J.J. Watt can take over games. Until further notice, I'm of the opinion that unless there's a defense where you absolutely have to play, just punt the position like we did last week at the Browns, which it really worked out. With that said, if Deshaun Kaiser is playing, he trumps that rule, and you start your defense against Deshaun Kaiser. As a Browns fan, he's a absolute disaster of a quarterback.
So who's the punt then? Surely it's not Cleveland again for 2000.
It's not. It's probably going to be. I'm probably going 2,600 with Houston. It's not as low as I would like to go, but it's the only team that I think really works. I could get behind.
For 100,
I could get behind the. I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say it. I could get behind the Bills there.
I thought you were going to say it.
You said
I could get behind the Bills in a GPP.
Oh no! I don't. Well,
West Coast going east. It's a thing, and they're 2,100. And if you're struggling for dollars, I don't love it clearly, but.
A wise man once told me that if you feel super comfortable with your GPP lineup, you're probably doing it wrong in a giant tournament.
Yeah, I mean, the Browns are actually intriguing at 2,000 simply because, and I know they're projected as one of our lowest teams, but they could give up 35, and they had, 6 turnovers last week and 4 sacks? Myles Garrett's the real deal. So, I mean, they get a couple sacks and a couple turnovers, and they'll get you 5-6 points. They might give up 35, but –
it's less likely that footballs will be slipping out of people's hands indoors, though. But it's a good point.
For 2,000, they're too talented to be the cheapest defense.
It is. Garrett played awesome last week, for sure.
All right, guys, let's talk about stacks. John, I think you alluded to maybe some stacks earlier. Hit me with your favorite stack of the week.
I love Matthew Stafford. I talked about him earlier. I think teaming him up with Kenny Golladay, who I perceive to be coming into his own this year, finally getting some opportunity. I like that stack, and I love the fact that Austin, who's the most agreeable of the four of us, puts up his red black-eyed Joe with it. So I'll let you talk about that. After I talk about the pivot that will be the least owned, I'm curious to know what Ryan's going to think of this. Maybe I've got another red black-eyed Joe on this. James Conner, 38 points last week, super highly owned coming into this week, probably the number one owned running back in the entire industry. Antonio Brown, chalk. Why not look at Juju to Big Ben at home? I think that'll be an under-owned stack for the type of upside it brings to the table. So those are the two stacks that I'll mention in this segment.
I agree with that. I think did I say that earlier? It was written down. I like Juju this week. I like Juju.
You like Juju every week.
I do.
Ryan, tell me about another. I was just busting your chops, Sean, by flashing up the sign.
Oh.
I feel like Kenny Golladay is like that guy who's gonna be something all the time, but just sort of like never gets there. And I kind of am not gonna believe it until
I think you're gonna eat those words one day.
The truthers are uniting after Monday night. He had a big game Monday night.
Sure.
So real quick, it's not a stack, but one thing I didn't mention, just as a game strategy, maybe just a leverage play. Nobody is talking about Kareem Hunt as a running back in the highest scoring game of the week.
Mm-hmm.
There were 2 touchdowns that Pat Mahomes threw last week where he threw the ball combined 18 inches forward. There's no reason why those don't turn into Kareem Hunt goal line carries. So anyways, moving on to stacks, though, we didn't mention Matt Ryan, Julio Jones. I like them this week. In Julio's last 3 home games against Carolina, he averages just shy of 9 catches, 186 yards.
Doesn't score touchdowns.
He averaged 0.7 touchdowns. He had 2 touchdowns in those 3 games, 22 fantasy points. If you can get me 9 and 163, I almost don't need a touchdown. It'd be great to have one, but
the problem's Ryan there, right? I mean, I'm not worried about Julio ever.
Ryan's only 5,700 this week. I mean, that's got to be the lowest he's ever been priced.
I know, but he should be free.
Well, I don't mind. I could see that game being a sneaky shootout. And so Ryan, Julio, and even Christian McCaffrey, who I mentioned earlier, if you wanted to run it back. So I like those guys, and then I think I had one more. Yeah, actually, mine was in the San Francisco-Detroit game as well. So kind of any combination you want there. But I also like Marvin Jones just for GPP. A lot of deep targets. He had one that slipped through his hands, one that he barely missed, and a touchdown that would have been a really hard catch that he couldn't come up with. So maybe some instant regression there could be in store, and I like Marvin Jones. He's Detroit's deep ball guy now.
Devin, who do you like for stack?
Couple things. So Case Keenum, Emmanuel Sanders, just too cheap again. Tyrod Taylor and Jarvis Landry. If the Browns get behind, they could just be peppering Landry all game. And then the last stack that I really like, it's just stacking the Kansas City game and Pittsburgh without Antonio Brown, and potentially without James Conner. It's loading up on Juju, loading up on the Chiefs, and hoping that it's a shootout, but Juju catches 2 long touchdowns, and Tyreek and Patrick Mahomes do what they did last week. So it's a stack that I'll be having just because I'll have so much Brown, so much Conner that if they don't go off, it could save my week and then some, right? So if the game's still high scoring and those two have an okay game, they're going to get their points, but that's an interesting one that I'm looking at.
Yeah, kind of trying to figure out a way to distribute your roster percentages there a little bit.
Because if Antonio Brown has, 8 for 120 but doesn't get in the end zone, that's 23 points. That's not going to kill you.
Right. All right, let's move on to parting thoughts, guys. Maybe some players you didn't get a chance to mention, or some feature you're thinking about, or some advice for how to handle week 2 specifically. John, you look like you've got something on your mind. What is your parting thought of the week?
I got 2 quick points. I'm only allowed 1, but I'm going to take 2 quick ones.
You can do it, man.
One is that I really love the Kareem Hunt call. If you're not already checking in, I've got this tips and picks video version that I've been doing every week. I record it on Wednesdays or Tuesday night sometimes, and it's going out on Roto Grinders and Football Guys. And you'll see all the reasons I agree with Ryan on that front with regards to why Kareem Hunt is an excellent GPP play this week. So please check it out. It's on both our site as well as Roto Grinders. The second is Lamar Miller is a really interesting play, and I don't think any of us mentioned him tonight. If you don't know why, check out our buddy, fellow football guy, at Phil FBG, PHILFBG on Twitter. He's got some really nice numbers on why Lamar Miller should be at the top of your GPP list, and I'm sure he's going to talk about it in his article, GPP Domination, this week.
Nice. Ryan, what are your parting thoughts?
We kind of got through most of what I had. The one guy that I had written down here that I didn't mention was Chris Thompson for Washington. So it is interesting that Alex Smith's favorite 2 receivers are not wide receivers. So right. Thompson had a very nice game last week, over 100 total yards on 11 or 12 touches. But other than that, I'm really excited that college football is free this week. I know Devin's probably going to talk about it more, but at the risk of him bragging, which I'm sure he's not reluctant to do, it is mostly his work, especially on our lineup builders, on the projections. So I look forward to playing lineups that are going to look probably similar to Devin's because they're his numbers. But I'm very excited. We're going to be cooking out here in Orlando, watching some college football and playing some DFS. And so everybody that's not a member of Football Guys that gets to see this on YouTube for free should go take advantage and see that for free. I think we're the only site that offers college football without an additional price on top of the DFS subscription package. So has to be the best value because it's free and it's good. So that's all I had this week.
Right on. Devin, tell us more about what we got going on.
Yeah, a lot of thoughts. A lot of things running through my brain. First, I want to say stay safe in the Carolinas. Hopefully we were able to provide a little bit of entertainment as you guys brace for the hurricane. So thoughts are with you guys. Second, I mean, 2 tight ends on DraftKings isn't unthinkable this week. If you're looking to save money, you could agree with both of us and take Jared Cook and George Kittle, and everyone's happy.
If that ends up winning the Millionaire Maker, like that would be fantastic.
I'll take 1%. Third, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into the college football stuff that we do. So it's 100% free this week. Even if you've never played college football, you don't know anyone in playing, go out and if you like this show, go out and support us and just give us a click and exit the article for all I care. But if you are intrigued and you can put up with me at least for an hour at this point in the show, go out and at least read some of the stuff that we're doing, because there's a lot of work involved in it.
Yeah, these guys work hard on it. Like these guys said, all our college football content is free this week over at footballguys.com. Check that out. We've also got NFL lineup optimizers as well as Steve Buzzard's projected roster percentages. That's all free this week. Give us a test drive.
And start Emmanuel Sanders, please.
And start Emmanuel Sanders. We'll be back next Friday morning with our Week 3 episode. That's all we have for this edition of the Power Grid. So on behalf of John Lee, Ryan Hester, and Devin Knotts, I am Austin Lee saying thank you for watching and thank you for being a football guy. To check out our content at footballguys.com, click the button on Devin's face. To subscribe to our YouTube channel, be sure to click on the button on John's face. And if you'd like to see our latest video, click on the giant video in front of Ryan's face. Click any of those now. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening.